Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Good evening. I call this meeting to order at 6:21 p.m. Along with Director After, Director DeFreitas, and myself are present tonight, meaning that we have a quorum. Thank you to our interpreter, Astrid. Would you please share the interpretation instructions with our participants, and then we can turn on the interpretation function. Good to go? Good. Okay. The first business in order is the approval of the agenda. Directors, are there any proposed changes to the agenda?
I have a proposed change to the agenda to strike the executive session that was scheduled on the agenda tonight from the agenda due to illness from 2 out of the 5 board members.
So would somebody like to make a motion to, as a full motion of doing that?
Sure. So I make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
Do we have a second?
I second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. As we have no no's, the motion passes. Our next agenda item is our opening celebrations and updates by our interim superintendent, Dr. Anna Cole.
Good evening. It's still February, but we have some celebrations for the work happening across the district right now. Want to celebrate and share a lot of gratitude for our nearly 1,400 emerging bilingual students who participate in the Access for ELL testing over the last couple weeks. It's a big lift from our teams to make sure we have that assessment completed, and it's an assessment of English language proficiency. So we're really happy to celebrate that the students made it through that assessment, and we should get data much later this spring on how they did. Kindergarten registration is underway, and we're on a slightly different time frame this year to try to get a better grasp of our enrollment numbers earlier in the year as we work on budgets. And so we're delighted to be welcoming new families and old families with new siblings into our kindergarten program. So, and if folks are looking for more information, there's a lot on our websites. Also excited to just draw our attention to our high school thespians. Glenwood Springs High School's production of Funny Girl will open next weekend and run through the weekend of March 1st and 2nd. And the Basalt High School production of Mean Girls, the musical, began last week with auditions, and they invite kids from across Basalt and Carbondale to participate. So lots of fun theater coming up. Just want to remind folks that our school safety forums will be next week. Monday will be at Roaring Fork High School, Tuesday at Glenwood Springs Middle School, Wednesday at Basalt High School. The meetings will be from 5 to 6:30 in English, 6:30 to 8 o'clock in Spanish, with interpretation of both meetings. And then just wanted to celebrate last Thursday evening. I was in this building for some evening meetings with our interest-based bargaining group, had their mid-year check-in. This is a moment where over 20 teacher representatives, school leaders, and administrative staff, and the teacher representatives and school leaders are all there as volunteers. We're working to share their collaborative solutions that teams were working on. And while that group was meeting, at one point I ran across the hall to help a team get set up in this room, which is where the district student services team, in partnership with the Carbondale Youth and Family Advisory Council, was sponsoring a parent education session on healthy eating and supporting youth with healthy eating habits. And yet another room the same night was our housing committee, which is another group of Roaring Fork School District staff, teachers, support staff who also volunteer their time to work on revising our housing guidelines. And it was just a real testament to the extra mile that our families, our staff, our students give, especially at a really hard time of year, to support all these different things that are happening across our district. So just really wanted to share some gratitude for all of those folks who are working long days and showing up at all sorts of things that are happening in the evenings. That's all we got.
Thank you, Dr. Cole. The next business in order is a pre-collegiate program update with a presentation from Dave Smith, and you'll introduce.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
One point of clarification to Dr. Cole's report, because I can hear Gayla Rose's voice in my head. Funny girl opens this.
Oh, it's this.
Yes. Don't miss it. They've been putting a lot of work in that.
Thank
Tech
you.
website, so.
Can you use the mic?
Oh, I can use my, you never told me I had to use a microphone before. I usually have a pretty loud projected voice, but I understand it's not just like, so. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave Smith. I've met most of you before. I am the director of the pre-collegiate program. With me is Carly Colia. She's our Basalt High School coordinator. We have a brief update we want to give you, but obviously allow some time for questions and comments. It's been an incredibly busy year for pre-collegiate, so I appreciate the opportunity to come before you and talk a little bit about the work that we've been doing. I always joke, it's kind of my pat joke, that pre-collegiate, sometimes we feel like we're the Navy SEALs of college advising. We sort of sweep into buildings under the cover of night and do a bunch of college advising with students and then leave, and nobody knows we've been there. We kind of like that most of the time, but every now and then it's good for us to see the light of day and come before you and talk a little bit about what we've been focused on. So the biggest and most important news is, and please do interrupt me anytime you need to, this is the 20th anniversary of the program, which is sort of amazing. It was founded in the 2003-2004 school year, so we've been around for 20 years. It's kind of crazy to think that it's been that long, but we've grown like mad over that time frame, and we're really excited at where we are with our enrollment. This year alone, though, we've been focused on a couple of big projects for us. We have a newly adopted strategic plan that our advisory board just adopted a couple of weeks ago. That's a 3-year plan that sort of sets the tone for where we're headed next. It's actually our first official strategic plan. So again, kind of coming into the light of like doing things the right way and being sort of strategic about it. We have a new mission statement that we've been working on as a staff and revised and adopted that sort of, I think, better encapsulates the work that we're really trying to accomplish and brings us to where we are. We've clarified some of our learning targets and in alignment with our curriculum and our outcomes that we're looking for students. We're right now in the process. Kenny actually got an email from me tonight about our mentoring program, which has kind of historically been the bedrock of the pre-collegiate program. But given some of the changes we've had in our growth and development, this has been an area for us to really re-examine and try to figure out ways to enhance and make the sort of experience that we're having for both our volunteers and our staff and our students as good as possible. So that work is actually ongoing right now. And then we actually have a job posting right now too for a new position. I think growth can kind of be summed up in a lot of ways, but one of the kind of crazy ways is when I was hired 10 years ago as the assistant director for the program, I was the second full-time employee for pre-collegiate. With this hopeful new hire, that will be our 6th full-time employees. So that's a big change in the staffing model that we have too, which has created some obviously some downstream impacts and issues we're going to be talking about too. So just really quickly, a quick restatement of what it is we do. This is part of our mission statement too, but we are what we consider ourselves to be a college access program for motivated, that's an important word, first generation students in the school district who've been selected, again, another important word, based on a demonstrated commitment to pursuing something after high school. We always joke that yes, we're pre-collegiate because post-secondary education doesn't sound as cool. It's just too much of a mouthful, but we really are focused on whatever that second step is after high school. It does not have to be a bachelor's level program. Our students are open to explore whatever it is they choose to after they graduate from high school. All we want to know is that they have some demonstrated interest in saying, hey, after I get out of here, I want to do something else. And if that something else requires education, we're hopefully going to help them along the way. Oh, I've used a little clicker thing. Our current students, so this is where we are as we sit here today. We have 100 middle school students enrolled right now across the 4 middle schools that we serve. Quick reminder, that's the 3 major publics. So that's Glenwood, Carbondale, and Basalt middle schools. We also have a presence at Riverview. We have worked with, but do not have direct service models at the charter schools. But we're in communication with those 2 schools to help try to identify students who may be going to the high school level that we can potentially enroll in the program. And we have 273 high school students enrolled, and we're just at the 3 big high schools. So Glenwood, Basalt, and Roaring Fork. Our maximum capacity is about 420 students. And I do want to make sure that I'm clear that capacity for us is not necessarily target enrollment because of some of those things I mentioned before. We're looking for demonstrated interest in the program and motivated students and committed students. We sort of take the students as they come at us. And so we know that we can serve up to 420 students, but we don't consider it necessarily a failure if we're suddenly serving less than that. It's just that's what the demand is. That being said, the model that we use kind of has some structural problems with it, in that we operate with a coordinator in each of our high schools, and then we have a middle school coordinator as well. And their capacity really dictates our overall capacity. So we typically do up to 20 students in per grade level at Basalt and Carbondale, and then up to 30 students in the Glenwood, just because it's a bigger school and we have a little bit more capacity there. So some grades we have less than 20 students who have stepped up in that grade level at that building to say, I want to be part of the program. Other grades, we are full at capacity and maybe even have a wait list. So it's kind of an interesting desire for us to kind of look at the system model and say, like, how are we best serving students? But that capacity number, that 420, is kind of the max of where we're headed in any given year. We definitely have grade levels that are right at that 70 student capacity. The class of 2024, our current seniors, that's an example. We have 69 seniors in the program. All of them at this point have been accepted to a four-year school, which is a benchmark we like to look at. But obviously, one of the things I just mentioned is we don't care if they go to a four-year school. So just being accepted shows us that they have a pathway to that option, but that may not be the best option for them. Right now, we're very excited. We had 3 Daniel finalists. We had a Bachelor Scholarship finalist, a Questbridge finalist, and a Gates semifinalist from this cohort of 69. So we're excited to see where they go next. And I put FAFSA issues up on here, but I don't want to bore everybody and I don't want to press everybody. Just know that the FAFSA is a mess. We hate it. This is the worst year for FAFSA ever. I'm happy to get on my soapbox anytime and talk about that with anybody if you have questions about the FAFSA. Unfortunately, I do think the sort of sad part about that is it is affecting the most vulnerable students the hardest. So we're really working hard as a staff to try to figure out ways we can support that. Our college partners have been doing some amazing work around trying to support students. We still don't really know what the outcome that's going to be. Our worry and our fear is that students won't be pushing themselves as far or going to the schools they really want to because of financial issues or even perceived financial issues, which is always a sad thing to be dealing with. So that's our class right now. Last year, just to recap them, we had 52 members last year's class, 100% graduated from high school, which is a measure we track. 100% were accepted to a bachelor's level program, a four-year school. Overall, that 52 students received 442 college acceptances, which again, for us, indicates a level of choice. That's 2-year or 4-year bachelor or associate degree program. They received over $300,000 in local scholarships alone. And then we had a Questbridge Scholarship winner, a Daniels Fund Scholarship winner, an Amazon Future Engineer Scholarship winner, and a 5 Point Dream Festival project winner as well. So it was a pretty cool class. But I like to say, like, these are exceptional outcomes, but they are not the exception. We like to think every class is going to have these kinds of same outcomes. And I always challenge our next class, like, let's do more college acceptances, more money. Let's have more options, to sort of lay the bar down. So our new mission, we're really trying to partner with our students to choose the post-secondary path that's best for them. Again, getting away from that concept of 4 years best. It's not. We try to provide comprehensive high school college advising and mentoring, access to the resources that they need, and then the experiences that they need to continue to go through the process. Our vision is for all of our students to be inspired, hopefully have new opportunities, build relationships, better understand themselves, and achieve whatever future it is that they want. We're really trying to focus on their choice, not my choice, not their parents' choice, not their teacher's choice, but what do they feel empowered in order to pick for that next step, for whatever it is they choose to do, even if it's not going on to an educational opportunity. Our big learning target, and this is what we're working on a lot this semester because we're coming up on the end of the year, is that all of our seniors are going to graduate with a personalized plan that evaluates all of these different factions and allows them to then pick the both how to choose that pathway, how to be supported in that pathway, and how to implement it along the way. And that's really our goal. Is we consider a success if they've done that. I've looked at a 4-year school, I've looked at a 2-year school, I've looked at a certificate, I've looked at a gap year, I've looked at military service, I've looked at straight to workforce. I choose this because, and that's really how we define success. So it does not have to be, even like I said, actually attending school. Although I will say, last year was a pretty good example. About 98% of our students did go on to start their first day at college after graduating last year. So we certainly want that to be in their opportunity and the ability to do that. But we're not saying that that's the only measure of success for a student. I won't go through all of our learning outcomes. They're in the materials, but these are the things that are sort of underlying our curriculum as a program that we go through. So you can start to see it's, it's our mentoring piece, it's our college counseling piece, it's our post-secondary partner programs and our summer programs that we spend with our students on campus visits and college tours. We're trying to do a lot more work around early identity development with students and telling their story in a sort of positive way. I always like to say that it's really hard for the first time you ever talk about yourself to be 650 words on the Common App. So we want to have them introduced to the concepts of telling their story and owning some of their value systems and their identity a little earlier in the process. And then how that fits into some of their academic challenges and academic exploration as well. So all of these learning outcomes are things that we want each of our students to have the opportunity to experience. And then we can hopefully be able to say like that by doing that, you're going to be able to wind up in the position we want you to be in. So we did just adopt a strategic plan. This is, again, I won't go through all of these, but these are kind of our big 3 pillars for the next 3 years that we're going to be going through: some organizational objectives, some programmatic objectives, and operational ones, kind of as pertains to the board and to the district. Some things I will highlight. Obviously, I just talked about the mentor program. We're going to be working on sort of how that works and our relationship between the district and the community when it comes to supporting students. We're always sort of faced with issues around growth. Can we do more? Can we do more for more students? Can we do more for our students for a longer period of time? I think we've been very intentional this year of looking at our strategic plans and being like, we're going to go into that only after we have some data-informed decisions that's making us decide why we're making those choices, not rushing blindly into serving more students just because. I am clear right now, it's not pre-collegiate for all. We are a selective program. The students have to want to be there. They have to be motivated to be there. They have to say, I'm going to do the things that are necessary to be here. We kind of feel like that model is going to stay for a while. So it's not, the goal is not to just make this a classroom-based experience. This is a relationship and mentoring-based program. So we're really trying to focus on, if there's going to be an additional growth, it has to be intentional. But one of the ways, and we'll talk about how you guys can support, how the district can support us a little bit more too, is, for example, we don't even know the fundamental question of how many first-generation students are there in the school district. I get to ask that question a lot when we're doing fundraising work, and the answer is, we don't really know. So we can't even say pre-collegiate serves X% of that or X% of the eligible students. We know we've been able to serve this number of students and we have demand for more. So that's been kind of driving growth over the years, is like, who wants the service and can we serve them? I think we want to be a little bit more intentional around some of that data collection piece. We are working with the data team and they've been great about trying to give us the information we have. And we're going to start to identify the holes that we're seeing and figure out ways to try to fill those data holes before we decide to launch into any new programming or new services or new models or things like that. I think the other thing we're really trying to focus on is, as we've grown as a program, obviously from 1 employee to 2 employees, now to 6, that has increased our fundraising needs. The district, if you guys don't know, provides about 35% of our operating budget for the program, and the rest we privately fundraise. So we kind of act like a nonprofit in that regard. A lot of grant writing, a lot of donor solicitation, a lot of fundraising. We kind of have a nonprofit mentality as a program. So the new hire we're trying to do is to help us expand some of that development capacity. Right now, I do all the development work. We were able to retain a grants consultant this year, which is really exciting, mostly because the main person working on our grants is a pre-collegiate alumni, which is pretty cool. So she's going to be writing our grants for us. It's a nonprofit company out of the Front Range that's going to help us with grant capacity building, but we just need to do more development work. So we're always looking for new sources of revenue. We're always looking at ways we can just maintain the level of service that we're providing. And I think that's going to be one of the big pieces going forward, is raising program awareness, making sure people are aware of us when they're thinking about giving their time or treasure. So again, some next steps that we have as a staff that we're working on the rest of this school year. We're revising our development and operational metrics. And by that, I mean, what data are we collecting? How are we collecting it? And how do we define success? Again, there are programs like ours that define success by things like 4-year college attainment rates. We're not going to define success that way. That's just not the way we see the world. But there are certain things we're always going to come back to, high school completion being one of them. We are a K-12 program, first and foremost, and that's going to be our bedrock for forever. But there are other ways we can measure that success too. And we're going to be really looking at that data piece. We're going to be trying to really make sure that we're not having what I call mission creep, or opportunities for us to grow outside of the scope of what we're really good at and what we're doing well, and allow our staff to be focused on the work that we know is the high impact for students. We're gonna work on to try to understand the size of the population that's out there and whether there are holes and what pre-collegiate is doing to support those before we consider potentially any additional growth. And then we're looking at our partnerships as well. We have intentional partnerships with a number of colleges and universities throughout Colorado. We're looking to potentially expand that to cover all of the colleges within Colorado, which would be great, but also internal partnerships in the Valley, community partnerships, corporate partnerships, either on the development side, the mentoring and recruitment side. There's just more opportunity there than I think we've been able to explore. So again, we're hoping with potentially a new hire, we'll do more outreach, more engagement, and be better posed, I think, to continue to deal with those development issues and those recruitment issues down the line. So how you guys can support us? We don't want to fly under the radar forever. So the more we can get the word out that the program exists and that we're an opportunity for volunteers or for donations or for really innovative ideas or people who want to be, connected to kids, we want to get to the people's tops of mind. So when they think of English in Action and think of the buddy program, they think of Valley Settlement, they think of us too. And we're not there yet. So even though we've been around 20 years, I feel like we're really at the burgeoning stages of really trying to grow as a nonprofit in that intentional regard. That enrollment and district data piece, like we're looking at growth long-term. Demographic data, like are the populations we serve changing? Are we going to be able to continue to serve this number of students? Do we need to do more? Things like that. And then just development work. I did want to just say too, back to the eligibility criteria, because I know sometimes there is confusion about that. Where we approach students, we're open to anybody in the school district who identifies as first generation. We also have a very broad definition of what that is, broader than even a lot of colleges and universities use. For us, it's neither parent has a 4-year degree or a bachelor's level degree from an American institution. But that means if you have anything less than that or anywhere other than the United States, you're still eligible for the program. So we have we cast with a very broad net. Doesn't matter your race, income, ethnicity, background, immigration status, all of that we don't consider when making decisions on enrollment. And the other misnomer I think we get a lot is like, if we don't get in 7th grade when we start our program, are you forever barred from getting into pre-collegiate? The answer is no. We are constantly reviewing applications up to junior year. We'll take students into the program. So we really want to try to be really clear with our staff and clear with the buildings and do a better job of explaining to the district who we're serving, why we're serving them, and how we can get more eligible students who really raise their hand and say like, hey, I'd really like to do something when I get out of high school. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're really excited. I think the outcomes, we've been really excited to have stayed steady even through, the pandemic. And I think we're really excited to see what the next phase of the next 3 years are going to be. But I feel like we're poised in a way that we haven't been historically. So thanks for letting us come give you a quick update.
Thank you for that presentation, Dave. Right now, we're going to give each board member up to 2 minutes to share comments or ask questions. And we'll start with Director After.
Thanks for being here. I admittedly have not been familiar with the program until now, so really appreciate it. So I have some basic questions to help me understand. Is pre-collegiate, is it a standalone 501c3? Is it part of the district? What's your annual budget and how much money does the district give you?
Great questions. Those are the most basic questions. I love those questions because no, we're not a standalone 501c3. So we're district employees that we are a program of the district. So similar to like the Family Resource Center in that, we're embedded within the district. That does cause a lot of donor confusion sometimes because we're not a nonprofit, even though we act like a nonprofit. We do have our own board and it's an advisory board. They don't have hiring and firing, but it's comprised of partners and, former volunteers and things like that help kind of guide our work. So that's the sort of instant answer to the question. This year, our budget is right about $500,000 total. 90% of that goes into staff. And the staff support that we have. The school district does offer a lot of in-kind, if you think of it that way, support to us as well in the form of like office space within the buildings. We're embedded in each of the high schools and in the middle schools. We have office space in those buildings, which has been great for those buildings to work with us. We have an office right here that we are able to be here. And the district right now is providing, like I said, about 30% of that, little over 30% of that this year.
So are you trying to grow your budget? Is that why you're adding development?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those necessary evils of like, in order to continue to fundraise at the level we need, we're probably going to have to bring somebody on, which is going to increase our fundraising needs. So yes, I think our budget, like right now, we're at that $500,000 does not include the new hire. So that would be an additional FTE we're going to bring on board with that. And we're trying to be really good to the new hire and say, like, you don't have to fundraise for your job. But the purpose of that is to develop our development capacity in a way we don't have the ability to now. So yeah, I'm expecting our budget next year will look more like 600,000. But hopefully we'll be able to be fundraising internally more intentionally.
Do you have data on the number of your participants who graduate from a 2 or 4 year college?
Yeah. So I always start with the bad news first, which is the reason pre-collegiate even exists to begin with is, historically speaking, low-income first-generation students who go to college, regardless of ethnic or racial background, have a 12% college graduation rate. And that's students who show up the first day of college. So they got through the high school stuff. They got through the FAFSA. They got through scholarship applications. They got through the Common App. And when they get to college, they're graduating at about 12%. If you take income out of that and just say first generation period, it only rises to a quarter of students. So a quarter of first generation students who go to college graduate within the normal times allotted for graduation. We're very fortunate. Our college graduation rate right now is at 82%. So we feel like we're doing obviously really well compared to those national average numbers. I also don't say like our students are the most amazing first generation students in the world, but I think one of the things we've learned over the years is the purpose of pre-collegiate is to help students ask the most difficult and most fundamental question they can when they get to college, which is, I need help. And if they can do that, their chances of graduation go up.
Great. I'm looking, oh, thanks, Jonathan. Okay, one more question. Is your number of participants growing year over year?
It has been
I saw you
growing
had a
year over
cap,
year.
but okay.
Yeah, I think we're sort of settling into what we think is going to be the new norm, but it definitely fluctuates year over year based on recruitment and based on the eligibility size. So sometimes we'll have, like right now at Basalt High School, for example, we only have 11 seniors in that cohort out of a 20 space allotment. But in Glenwood, out of a 30 space allotment, we have 39 students. So it definitely fluctuates like that. But we saw a sort of meteoric rise in growth, and then we've kind of leveled off. But we are seeing year over year, it's continuing to tick up a little bit.
Okay. Thanks.
Director DeFreitas.
Thanks for being here. I taught 8th grade English at Carbondale Middle School for a while, and your program was hugely impactful for quite a number of the students that I was teaching at the time, and I saw it change the tracks of their lives in a big way. And the largest part of that, of course, is the relationship with their mentors. And so just for Betsy's perhaps and those viewing, can you clarify again what that looks like? It's an ongoing, the mentors travel with the students, right? Up through grades.
Yeah. So historically, the mentors were the only way we delivered curriculum. And so starting in 7th grade, mentors from the community would get a group of students and they would follow them from 7th grade till 12th grade. As we've gotten more sophisticated, we've been very fortunate that we've been able to bring staff kind of in at both levels. So now staff is actually running our middle school programs for the most part, and we're bringing mentors in a little later in the process for that transition to high school. But yes, they are still staying with their group. The goal is longitudinally until they graduate from high school. The other big change we had this year is for the very first time, pre-collegiate is considered a class for seniors. So actually on student schedules, there's now pre-collegiate advisory, which is a pass-fail course that we have negotiated with the 3 high schools. And then so we have our students, and that's staff-led as well. So we kind of have staff at both ends and then the mentors in between. But it's still that longitudinal relationship piece.
Yeah, those relationship pieces, that is critical,
It's critical
for all of the students that I saw. And then I was going to say, have you been finding success in locating funding sources that support staff retention instead of deliverables and capital? I want to be able to show my board this. How has that been going for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think obviously one of the things we are both very proud of is the fact that we are such a staff and relationship driven model. But yes, sometimes getting fundraising for operations and maintenance rather than the next new shiny thing has been difficult. I think funders in this valley are definitely coming around to understanding that those nonprofits or programs that have demonstrated track records that rely on human services as the large delivery of their components need that ongoing support. We have such a low overhead of like what we consider administrative, almost 100% of the money that gets invested goes directly to student support, which I think is how we are able to get the outcomes we have. So I think we've been able to do that, but it is always a tricky conversation for sure.
Well, how urgent, you said you have these asks of us and they seem pretty high level, pretty general. What do you actually need? Like, what's the urgency that we can support most immediately from our position here?
I think for us, it's really again, our sort of reintroduction to the program and understanding that we're here and helping us get the word out from a marketing perspective is probably one of our biggest goals in the short term. We're going to be trying to do some press around the 20th anniversary, for example, and we're hoping to get the board engagement in that process so that we're starting to raise the program profile a little bit, because we feel like with that will come some of the other things we're looking at. And then, like I said, the superintendent's office and the data team has been amazing at helping us with some of that high level data pieces, but there's going to be some stuff that comes out of that we're going to probably need to ask for better guidance on. For example, we know, like right now, there is on all the intake forms, you're talking about kindergarten registration, on that form is a box that parents can answer a question: what's the highest level of education that you've attained? It's a self-reported data piece. And to be honest, that's the only data we really have on whether you're first gen or not. So once we start to figure out like how big are those data holes, we may need to do something like a district-wide survey or some other kind of more concerted effort to kind of determine, can we answer that fundamental question of how many first generation students are in the district? So I don't have a specific ask yet, but I can see those things coming where we're going to be like, we would really love this data and we'd really love this information to keep going with the work, and we're not going to be able to get it without some support.
And then as far as your timeline for recruiting mentors and even student applications, do you need further support and outreach in that capacity as well?
Always, and those are ongoing. I think what we're, like I said, with this mentor technical assistance grant that we're doing right now, we've kind of put a little bit of a pause in mentor recruitment because we're not as clear on expectations as we want to be. We're trying to get that nailed down this semester and be done with it so that when we start in the fall, we'll be ready to go. I expect that's going to lead to a very intentional mentor recruiting push starting this summer to really reinvigorate. We had a lot of mentor interest during the pandemic. Then we had a real big dip in mentor retention. And it wasn't just us. Every mentoring program in the country or in the Valley was experiencing this. Buddy program was having trouble retaining mentors. English in Action was too. It's just things got kind of crazy after everything, So we saw that too, where all of a sudden our retention rates were the lowest they've ever been and our recruitment rates were low. And we kind of had to take a step back. But I am envisioning within a very short period, like in the next 6 months, we're going to be doing like campaigns that we're going to be putting out public facing information about trying to recruit the right kind of mentors to be meeting with our students.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you, first of all, for the program that you do. And
Thank you, Kenny.
And so I have been a mentor along with my wife. We have a group of 11th graders this year that we've had since they were 7th graders, a group of 12 of them. And it's just been an amazing program to watch their growth and their maturity over the time, and to see the questions that they ask and the information that we're able to provide, being that they don't maybe have that role model at home, has just been indispensable. And it's just, we're just really proud of the progress that they've shown, and that relationship, and having that relationship for them is really just another touch point for things that would go unanswered. And so I really applaud you for the program that you've put together, and I think it's great. My only question I would really have is, have you put any thought into what your alumni can do for you, and like how you can use that resource for these success stories? And maybe that could be like one of your marketing ways of going about, because they're well-rounded and have a broad reach and shows the success that you're hoping to get. And it seems like that maybe be a untapped resource that you have.
Totally right. And not to put too much on this new hire who hasn't been hired yet, but one of the roles we have for them is helping us to engage our alumni more intentionally, because they are amazing and their stories are amazing. And they're always so willing to do anything we ask if we just say, hey, can you give us a hand with this? So yes, it is a hugely untapped resource.
And then do you want to talk at all about how this extends into college and what the relationship onto college is?
Yeah, and so that was definitely a pre-pandemic. We actually received a grant from the state of Colorado to do intentional post-secondary support work as a program and kind of pilot some things with some of our college partners, which we were really, really excited about. And then when the pandemic hit, that all fell apart, and the grant unfortunately expired, and we had a staff member hired for that position that we weren't able to retain, and we kind of had to hunker back down. But one of the things we are hoping to do, again, very intentionally, very data driven, again, engaging the alumni, getting some information from them about what they need, is how can we, from our little tiny valley here, support our students at their chosen destination or in that chosen first year. And some of that, like cohorting, is a possibility. At Colorado State University, for example, we have 85 pre-collegiate students currently enrolled at CSU. I mean, we could have a party if we wanted to with that number of students. So there's opportunity there that we're not tapping into to build internal leadership with the alumni and build support mechanisms that are already kind of in place. So yeah, that post-secondary support is a big wish list thing for us in the near future.
And just my last thing then, from my perspective of having a student who's living with us this year, who's in pre-collegiate, and seeing what the pre-collegiate class offers to that student and having seen it through other students, I really think it's a great thing that you have that. And it's really seemed to be so supportive, especially around the college application times, to have that dedicated class and time. And I applaud you on having that. And thank you, Carly, for doing your share of that in your school. So thank you.
Thanks.
At this time, we're open up to 5 more minutes of discussion. If any other questions by any board members, or if not, we'll say thank you. Any other questions?
None for me.
Okay. Thank you both
Thank
for
you,
being
guys.
here. We
Thank
appreciate
you.
you.
Thanks so much for your support.
Yeah.
At this time, we welcome members of the public who have signed up to address the board. There is one speaker signed up tonight. The board allots 45 minutes for public comment. To respect the time of all who are present, speakers are to limit their remarks to 3 minutes or less. Reminder to all speakers to uphold our procedures for public comment. We ask that you be thoughtful and constructive with your comments, and thank you in advance for sharing your feedback. Members of the public who wish to share their views with the board may always do so in writing. For this evening's public comment, we received 1 written comment. And our first speaker signed up is Autumn Rivera, but I don't see her here.
No.
So
Nope.
And we didn't have anybody else signed up, did we, Jonathan?
We had somebody else, but she declined yesterday.
Okay. So we will move on through that. The next business in order is the approval of the consent agenda, which includes routine personnel, minutes from our previous board meetings on 2/6 and 2/13, along with policies and regulations JK, JKA, JKAR, KFA, and JB. Directors, are there any items that you would like to pull off the consent agenda for a separate discussion and vote? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that the board approve the consent agenda as presented.
Do I have a second?
I second.
Call the vote, please.
Director DeFreitas,
Aye.
Director Titler,
Aye.
Director After.
Aye.
Great. The next business in order is discussion on policy JKD, JKE, and regulation JKD, JKE/R. Each board member will have 2 minutes to share comments or ask questions. We will begin with Director DeFreitas.
Can you run me through, Dr. Cole, one more time, how there was something about we were editing the wrong document? Can you give me that? Oh, I'm sorry. I got a little lost there.
No, so were we, and I actually think those were predominantly the policies that we just, the JK,
Okay, so that was the
that
one
we
that
just
passed, right?
consented.
I looked
on,
through
yeah.
those. Okay, then. All right.
Mhm,
Thank you.
mhm.
I don't have a lot to add on these. Thank you.
Director After.
So on this is the suspension and expulsion of students, that's what we're talking about here.
Mhm.
Are the changes here regulatory or compliance in nature? The primary change I'm seeing is, well, there's a lot of changes, but including that we're changing from 3rd to 4th grade and higher grade levels. Some of how we think about expulsion and suspension. So is that a compliance measure or is that a best practice we're implementing?
Great question. Let me respond to that. And then I'm also going to defer to Chief Park, who's joining us virtually,
Oh.
if I missed anything.
Oh, hi.
I would say the state statute is really around, what was originally written. Our approach that's really leans more on restorative practices is we push those we've made the decision to say, we're not going to suspend or expel younger children.
Mhm.
And so we're actually being more, I guess you might say lenient, or we're not applying the ability to suspend 3rd graders in the way that the state allows. And so the staff recommendation here is that we're actually more careful with using those disciplinary measures with younger children. Does that?
Yeah, that's what I was
clarify?
wondering.
Okay. Chief Park, anything you want to add on that?
No, that's all. Can you hear me? Yeah. Can you hear me? No, I don't have anything else to add.
The thing I noticed about changing it from third to fourth grade is that then at a lot of our elementary schools, you have a single grade where that could be an option. And does that, according to the administrators and the teachers, does that work? Or is this something that should be maybe reserved for middle school and up?
That's a great question. And I'll lean to Chief Park on that one as well, just from that administrator viewpoint. We so rarely suspend or expel in the elementary schools at all, but I don't know, Chief Park, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think just to clarify, when we're thinking about the responses to discipline incidents, we do, like Dr. Cole said, want to be really careful and thoughtful no matter what grade. In terms of the students, fourth grade and higher, for example, who would be, quote, allowed to have a suspension, there are some cases and rare cases in which, you know, an in-school or out-of-school suspension is permitted in the younger grades. So it's not necessarily that it would never happen in a lower grade, but when we are thinking about developmentally appropriate behaviors that may be responded to differently if a student is, say, 7 or 8 versus 15 or 16, that's what we considered versus looking at it exactly the same way.
Thanks. And if a that's okay. If a student of any grade is expelled, is that an expulsion for the school year or for forever?
It depends on the
The
situation.
remainder of that school year.
Okay.
Sorry, can
Thanks. I don't have any other questions.
Can I,
Chief Park, jump
yep.
in.
Great. Expulsions are rare, as you know, and it is not necessarily for the remainder of the school year, but at most it is for 1 calendar year. But that's been rare.
I have one question about JKD, JKE. It states that a student in preschool, kinder, first, second, or third grade will not be suspended or expelled except in rare cases and as defined by law. Can you tell me what the defined by law part is? I know later in the document and it referred to JICDA, and when I looked that up, I wasn't able really to get any clarity in what that meant. So do we have like a definition on what the defined by law part is?
Good question. I'm going to defer to Chief Park on that one.
I don't know if you can see the comment, Director Teitler, but there's 3 instances: involves possession of a dangerous weapon, use, possession, or sale of drugs or controlled substance, or endangers the health and safety of others. The related, I don't know if you heard the first part.
Go ahead.
Okay. There is a law that is linked in the comments of the proposed policy, and the 3 instances that are permitted are if it involves possession or use of a dangerous weapon, use, possession, or sale of drugs or controlled substance, or endangers the health and safety of others.
Great, thank you. I did not see that. My other question happens to be with JKD, JKE-R. And the question about the part where it was that the suspension of 10 days or less, procedure for a suspension of 10 days or less, it talked about 3, 5, or 10 days. And then it talked about the 3-day one at the elementary level. And then it just said 10 days or less for students in 4th grade and higher. And then later on in a different part of it, it sort of like broke out the elementary, middle, high part into sort of like 3, 5, and 10, but that was maybe a little bit unclear in the first instance in which that's mentioned.
Thank you. We can make sure that it is aligned by the time of the next meeting.
Okay, now we have time for 5 additional minutes of comment if anybody has any further comment.
I actually had one question. Under JKD, JKE, and annual reports, it says this reporting will include disaggregated data. Do we not currently have disaggregated data on expulsions and suspensions?
We do, and we definitely track that and we
Okay.
report it to the state.
Thanks. I thought so. I just saw that added.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. Sure. Dr. Cole, and thank you, Chief Park.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to talk about our financial audit. Do I have a motion to approve the financial year 2023 financial audit?
Do we do that before discussion?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I ask that every time. I make a motion to approve the audit as presented. Even though I have questions about it.
Do I have a second?
I second.
We will now have 2 minutes discussion for each board member and 5 minutes open discussion. Are you good, Dr. Director, after starting with the 2 minutes, and then we can give you more time upon the 5 minutes if need be at that point?
Great, yeah. Let me just grab
Okay.
some notes here.
And we will start with you,
Okay.
Director, after.
Sorry, just give me 1 second. I've got some notes that aren't loading here.
Chief Markin, was there anything you wanted to say to open the discussion, or is it just dependent?
We
on our
usually-
questions?
Right, good?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks so much to you and the accounting team for putting this together. I know this is a huge amount of work for any institution to undergo an audit, and really important for taxpayers to understand transparently and appropriately how our funds are accounted for. So thank you. I just have a few questions as I was going through the materials that I wanted to clarify. So first, from the audit document, it says, let's see, the liabilities of the district exceeded its assets as of the end of June by 23.7 million net position compared to 21.2 million for the prior year, because of the increase in our share of para. Can you explain that to me?
Certainly. Thank you for the question, Director After. Real quick, with me tonight is Catherine Proctor, our financial controller for the district. Mr. Paul Backus, he's the partner on our audit firm from Mahan.
Great.
So para is the pension fund that all school district employees participate in. And that portion is our portion of the overall liability for para. So they divide it amongst all the schools, and Paul, correct me if I misspeak on this part. And that's really something we don't have. It's an actuarial calculation that's arrived at, and they assign a portion to us just like they do every school district. So it's not really
Oh.
something we have a ton of control over.
Yeah, so some background on
Yeah.
that. When Social Security Act was passed, the federal government constitutionally cannot tax state and local governments. So Social Security is set up for all private employees, and the state said, we want something for our public employees. So each state set up their own plan similar to Social Security, and for Colorado, it's called para. And so the legislature approves the rules of that. Your employees don't, and the district do not pay into Social Security, they pay into para. And then para has actuaries that determines whether the fund is, or whether the plan is fully funded or not. Colorado is actually not one of the better states.
Mhm.
And so that's your proportionate share based upon the number of employees you have in the pool compared to all the districts and both seats in the state. There's a separate pool for local education districts. So that's your share.
So the way it's presented here would be consistent across the state for every school district that's paying into para.
That's correct.
The numbers would change. Yeah.
Every school district has a liability. Every BOCES has a liability because the state pool is underfunded.
Yeah.
Therefore, your share is whatever percentage, just like everyone else's.
Thanks. On the management letter, it describes the segregation of duties in terms of internal controls, and there's a little bit of commentary about improvements that could be made in that. And I think our team's response was around staffing limitations. So in your experience as an auditor, presumably working with other school districts, how do you find that other districts with staff constraints deal with that type of feedback?
It's a challenge. We audit 30 other school districts, pretty much all the school districts in the Central Rockies. And honestly, it's a problem. Ultimately, you as the district have to determine what is the appropriate set of internal controls for yourselves. We're not here to tell you necessarily who should do what. We're only pointing out when you have conflicting duties. So the conflicting duties that you have as far as segregation duties goes is certainly not, I would say, critical. The one that probably is most important in my mind is the accounts payable segregation. And I think you just have to kind of keep looking for the right person in that office, getting them trained to break off conflicting duties. So one person doesn't have access to a full transaction cycle.
Okay. It says on page B4 of the actual audit document that expenses doubled from last fiscal year to this fiscal year, if I read that correctly. Can you explain that?
I'm sure that is entirely related to para.
Okay.
So you have to take well, let me find a page that maybe will explain that a little better.
Okay.
So
yeah, the one I was referring to is B4.
Yeah, and I'm gonna actually steer you to a different page. If you looked on page D29, and actually I can share my screen if you'd like, that might be helpful. So this is page D29. This is the para calculation. So basically Colorado's net pension liability for the school district trust fund is a deficit of 18 million. That assumes, I'm going to nerd out on you a little bit here, a discount rate of 7.25%, which probably easiest mentally to think of is that's what they think they'll earn on their investments in their pool.
Mm-hmm.
So they're basically $18 billion underfunded for all the school districts in both seasons in the state. Your share of that is 126 million based upon the proportional number of employees you have in the pool. And you can see what a 1%, this is kind of a sensitivity calculation. You can see what a 1% change does to that. If they earn 8.25% instead of 7.25%, that drops down to 13 billion. Your share would go to 84 million. And if they earn 1% less, yours goes up, another $22 million. And so I guess what I would do is if I was you, I would differentiate between expenses and expenditures. So
Okay.
You as a Board of Education and your management has control over your expenditures. That's how you budget. That's how you keep your books. The expenses you don't have control over because it includes your pension obligation. That's entirely determined by the legislature. we take the actuarial numbers, apply the math to reflect your share of the liability. And you can't pay that obligation early. You can't opt out. You kind of have no control, but ultimately you do have responsibility. It's kind of the worst of all scenarios. And so if you wanted to really look at the numbers that you are responsible for as the Board of Education and as management, probably a good place to look would be, let me just minimize some of my items here. And I guess I should back up. So you're looking in section B. So the entire report, if I can just back up, is covered by an independent auditor's opinion, be referred to as an unmodified opinion or a clean opinion. There's two sets of numbers in there. One is called modified accrual. That's how you keep your budget. That's what you're responsible for. And that is going to be basically C through C3 and back. The numbers pages C1 and C2 include include all your debt obligations that you don't always have control over. And those are going to be quite a bit different. So I'm going to actually flip to page E1, I believe it is. And E1 is your general fund. So it's not all your funds, but it is your general fund. That's your primary fund. And this has your budget actual. And if you took a look at E1, you'd see this is all kind of high level information, but you have the original budget, the final budget, actual amounts, and then a variance column, and then the prior year numbers. So the general fund had $85 million right here that came in during the year. Think of those as deposits in the bank. That compares to 79 million the previous year. And if you scroll down, you'll see you have to keep your records a certain way. Every district in both seasons in the state follows the same chart of accounts. So you have to account for it through direct instruction, indirect instruction, kind of these categories. And this is the expenditures, and that's what you as a Board of Education and your management team has responsibility for. So you ended up with a budget of $82 million in the general fund. You spent $81 million. You were 1.6 million under, and that compares with 66 million the previous year. So if you were comparing, kind of your area of responsibility, it would have gone from 66 million to 81 million. Keep in mind that those numbers can swing quite a bit with a lot of the federal grants that have come through in the last couple of years. So, ESSER and things like that will have a significant impact, but that's really, that's a long explanation to try and answer the question.
That's really helpful.
And the way I think about it is expenditures are cash out the door, things that will be cash kind of within the next 3 months. Expenses, you can have a non-cash expense. So if you think about a common one in the private world is depreciation. You depreciate an asset that's not necessarily cash out the door, but it's an expense you take on your financial statements every year. So expenses, like Paul mentioned, can have large non-cash expenditures on there as our liability changes. So when our liability goes from, I think Paul said 13 billion to 18 billion, not our liability, but our portion of that change gets reflected as an expense for the current year, even though it's not cash.
Okay. Do you know in advance, or when do you find out from the state what our para liabilities are? Do you find out when the fiscal year starts, or not until later?
It comes through as part of the audit process. It's
Okay.
actually something that McMahon does for us on our behalf.
Yeah, the state, actually, if you scroll down a little bit right here on page E1, you can see where it says pension direct distribution special funding. So the state has been putting in anywhere from 150 million to $200 million every year to try and improve para's underfunded liability. That's your share of that special funding. And it's swinging quite a bit because they put in 200 million a year for the 3 years before COVID, and then they quit during COVID, and now they've restarted. And it's kind of counterintuitive if you think about those things. So if they put $200 million in, the liability for all the districts is based on the actuarial projections going forward for 30 years. So probably a better example would be if they change some funding model for para, say they increase the district's share of 1% for each employee. They have to take that 1%, the actuaries do, times all the districts in all the payroll for all the districts in the state. And then they have to project that out 30 years. It creates this huge swing. And then we have to amortize that swing over 3 to 5 years. So I try not to get too wound up in it because A, I don't have any control over it. You don't have any control over it. But honestly, just from a citizen standpoint, if the legislature wanted to do something about education, they would figure out how to get para close to fully funded. Because when I started auditing schools, districts paid 9.2% in as the district share. You're now paying in close to 23%. And that's because it's gotten so underfunded. They're trying to bring it back up. But if you were paying 9.2%, I mean, you'd be able to hire a lot more teachers. You'd be able to pay your teachers a lot better. It's kind of frustrating from an accountant standpoint.
We'll talk about that a little bit at budget time, but so basically what Paul is saying, for every $100 we pay an employee, we have to also give $23 to para.
And look, I recognize you have this, 102-page report. But it's really not just for you, the Board of Education. Ultimately, this report, it's so lengthy because it's going to go to all your bondholders. So we upload it to the SEC. It goes to all your bondholders, goes to your banking relationships. There's a section in here that goes to the federal government for all the federal grants you get. We these guys transmit data to CDE as a component of all the state funding that you get. It goes to your insurance relationships. It goes to your banking relationships. It's just, that's kind of why it's brutally cumbersome. And, it's on your website to the extent that the electorate necessarily can kind of divine the intricacies of it. But those are the heavy users, bond analysts, federal government, state government, things like that. So.
Okay, we're gonna move over to Director DeFreitas, and then we'll come back if there's more questions at the end. That's cool.
Yeah. Sure. So then just on the note of what you were saying, who that big report goes to, and they'll be looking at it more closely. How does it look to them?
Well, you have, I haven't checked since the audit, but you have a good bond rating. Financially, you look, I think, very prudent compared to a lot of districts. You have reasonable balances. I don't think they're either unfairly, well, first, my job is to make sure the numbers are correct, but I look at reports all day. You don't have either too high of fund balances where you're not putting resources to work, taking care of your teachers and your students to the extent you can, but you also don't want them so low where if something changes, you have to crisis manage. I think you're kind of in the sweet spot of where you should be for a prudently run organization. You have basically a 26% reserve, which is a solid, reasonable reserve for you to have. And that's actually paying benefits, kind of that fiscal management that you've had now that interest rates are, 5-6%. I don't remember. I think you had almost $1 million in investment income this last year. So those districts that are running on a lot smaller reserve are tending to pay interest out for short-term financing, whereas you're actually able to use those resources to pay your teachers more and take care of your students. So I'm an Eagle County resident and taxpayer, and you guys and Eagle are kind of my gold standard.
I appreciate the summary and obviously I appreciate the staff work that goes into setting us up for that.
Yeah, I kind of want to show you this just so you understand. So this is actually your audit software. I'm not going to go into it in a lot of detail, but there are 389 different documents that your staff uploaded. So we actually set up this website here called Engagement Organizer, and it has everything that we need to do the audit. And your team has, spent months uploading data and dealing with requests. And it's not a small process. We have 5 CPAs that work continuously on this, asking questions, looking through documents. We pull documents not just from you guys, but from CD, from the federal government, from the SEC, from kind of all over. And I think probably the most important thing I would bring to you is, so in the letter, there's information in here that we have to communicate, like what are the biggest estimates. There's not really anything unusual that you guys have versus other districts. There really isn't any difficulties encountered performing the audit. It's really this section right here, corrected and uncorrected misstatements. That's out of the 389 pages of documents we looked at, well, that we scanned in, we probably looked at 500. What journal entries did we have to make to fix something? And there was one $29,000 entry that got capitalized as a fixed asset and we wanted to expense it. And that was it. And the reason I think that's critical is you as board members need to be able to, and the electorate and citizens need to be able to trust that the information financial information you're getting it is accurate. And it's not, we come in, post, 200 journal entries, fix it, and you'd still have an unmodified opinion because the numbers are right. But it's not, you want your clients to be correct when they start. You don't want to wait for us staff to fix it. And that's where you guys are. And I think that is so critical for an organization to be able to produce accurate financial data internally with your staff. You have $120 million rolling through. It's not a QuickBooks operation. There is a huge amount of compliance. And I mean, there are requirements that, nobody knows about, but these guys, because they're buried in a bond document on page 50 that says you have to have a reserve fund of this amount. And you have to have this much, set on your debt service mill levy. And those things are all in the background. You exist to teach students and educate kids, but if your team doesn't do their work, it bleeds out and causes problems with your core mission. That's not the case. I can tell you, I have a lot of management letters that are 5-6 pages of problem after problem after problem. It's our job to shoot you straight, but you guys have very clean records.
So then the note in the management letter about additional time due to significant delays, I don't need to necessarily go back through all of that, but do you feel like that's something we're going to encounter again, or was that just a unique situation that's been resolved?
I think that is, like it or not, been a kind of common theme for districts and honestly for every type of client. So we audit pretty much all the governments in the area. I think we audit every city, every county, every school district, and I don't know, all the Central Rockies. And there's been so much churn after COVID with staffing that the people that kind of are here feel probably like they're running on a treadmill to keep up. And that's just kind of been a common theme. So it isn't necessarily anything unusual, but I think a lot of that on the macro scale seems like everyone's changed jobs and hopefully now they stay for a while. But
Please.
I'll let these guys kind of decide the timing.
Over the last 4 years, we definitely have taken advantage of the audit extension that's provided by CDE. So we've filed that the last 4 years. Again, it's allowed within statute. We have to file a letter, they grant it, and then we have an additional 60 days. So I think when I started, we were having this meeting to approve the audit at the final board meeting in December. That is our goal as a department to get back there, because as Paul said, then coming back from winter break, we're done. We can focus on core mission of managing current year budget, looking at next year budget. Right now, all those things are kind of running together and competing with audit, which has huge kind of, as Paul said, behind the scene implications and things. So juggling those deadlines is suboptimal this time of year. I'd much rather be done with that, go on, have a nice winter break and come back. So that is definitely an area for improvement for us.
So basically, my two questions were the same as Director DeFreitas' questions, and so thank you for asking those. And I'll just ask a little bit more on that last question about the delays in gathering. Is that something, Chief Markham, that you feel like you have seen the reason why, and that you feel like that will not be the case next time, or is that just sort of the way the ball bounces? And
I think when we're pressed up with multiple delays or demands on our time in October, November, and we say, hey, we can get an extension till the end of February, and that happens, and that just kind of rearranges work. Like I said, I'd love to, we're working on tightening up processes that are done on a more, on a tighter basis, on a more timely basis, so that those things can be done. Again, I'd love to have the audit done on December 15th.
Okay.
But we aren't, again, the extension is there for a reason, and if we need to take advantage of it, we will, if it's in the best interest of the district.
Thank you. And then, Paul, I was going to ask you like the question, which I think you already answered, like, where are we? Like, if we were the Better Business Bureau, would we have an A+ rating? But you said that we were the gold standard. And so that just really makes me feel comfortable. And so I want to say thank you to Chief Markham and your staff for putting us in that position, and great job and really well done. And so thank you for that. And I do have one other question to ask, though. Actually, two other questions. That 9% to 23% that we paid a para that you mentioned.
Yes.
When was that 9% number from? Like, what year was that?
From the
in the
1990s, there's been multiple, I think, laws passed. I think right now they have an automatic adjustment factor. So when the fund doesn't earn a certain percent, it basically says that the fund participants will kick an additional amount. And the participants mean both me as a person, I'll pay additional out of my paycheck, and the district will also contribute. And so that goes up. I think fund performance was pretty, and it lags 18 or 24 months. And so I think there's risk. We were just came from a CDE training that will go up another 0.5%. But again, that's just less money we put into classrooms, we put into teachers' pockets, that we put into housing and other benefits. But that's kind of the state we live in.
And then my last question is, you said that we have a 26% reserve. What is that based on? What dollar amount is that 26% coming off of?
That'd be roughly 26% of our revenue. So we have roughly $100 million in revenue, and we have roughly $26 million in reserves, which, we did make a strategic decision to put portion of that towards our Meadowood housing to house 50 additional staff members. We don't use reserves lightly. We try to put them towards the most strategic thing possible. And with home prices and rents doubling in the last 2 or 3 years, I mean, that is about as strategic as it gets to make sure we've got a good teacher in front of our students.
So is this 26% reserve prior to the Meadowood money or after the Meadowood money?
It's prior. It'd be as of June 30th, 2023.
Okay.
Yeah. And then we're spending that down this year and a little bit into next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. At this point, we're going to go into 5 minutes of additional questions. If anybody else has those questions, and we can start with you, Director, after, if you have other questions.
I do. Thanks. The reserves is interesting. I'm in the nonprofit space where I work. We keep a proportion of reserves in the not unlikely scenario that fundraising dries up. But our revenue as a school district, it's not as variable, right? Like, you're not afraid that the state's, I guess anything could happen, but you're not really afraid that the state's not going to provide the revenue that they've committed to. So the reserves that we keep are really for additional expenses, not for changes to the revenue side. Is that right?
you certainly want to keep an amount of reserves on hand. Our policy states 10% plus the 3% TABOR reserve. So that's kind of a minimum
Okay.
13%. And the state, when there is a recession, they have less money, will cut funding. And we need to be able to either absorb that for a short amount of time until revenue recovers, or to buy us time to make strategic decisions if we do have to cut positions or cut programming. I mean, the reality is 85% of our expenditures are employees. And so if we need to cut big dollars, like that typically means positions for any school district in the state.
Mhm. Okay.
Well, and it's also worth mentioning that, the vast majority of your funding is coming from property taxes, which are all paid, March, April, May.
Mhm.
So these are June numbers. So you have to have adequate resources to get all the way through until you start collecting property taxes again.
Okay.
So sometimes people look at that number and think, oh, we have a lot of money set aside. And that maybe is true, but it's also kind of at your peak point of cash flow. If you looked at the number now, it would be significantly less because you're not collecting property taxes yet.
Okay. So the 26% is an average over the year.
It's our ending balance
Okay.
on June 30th. Yes.
Okay. On the management letter, the vacation accrual and payout for termination change that I noticed, is that a policy that we are going to be looking at? Because that seems like, and is that going through IBB? That just raised a little bit of a red flag for me, and not about the change in policy, just about like, are we communicating that appropriately?
Yeah. So this is the second year in a row. We tried to address it through a policy change last year. We went from 8 weeks maximum accrued to 10 weeks. We still have some folks over that. So I think at this point, we need to enact practice by the end of this fiscal year to make sure everybody understands that policy says you can have 400 hours accrued. So it's a very small number of employees. Not many employees have more than 400 vacation hours, but we'll have to work with those employees so they understand that we need to enact practice in alignment with policy.
Okay, so that's a staff practice, not a board policy.
Right now we have a policy and our practice is not following policy. We need to
Okay.
change our practice.
So we actually, from the audit, have a plan we're consulting with our legal to try to figure out what needs to happen to that policy so that we stay in alignment, and then build the internal controls so that we're not, I think where we feel like we're a little bit stuck is that once those hours beyond 400 have been issued, we can't pull back a benefit. And so we have to figure out how to navigate that and then make sure that our policy aligns with the statute. And so you should expect to see some revisions and follow up on that, both in a procedural, how we're going to address those employees that have accrued more than what the policy states, and then how we're going to align and work that through moving forward.
Okay. And then just one final question, then I'll wrap up. For how many years have we used your auditing firm, and is it best practice to switch firms on occasion, or in public education finance, do we stick with the same firm? What's the best practice on that?
Well, as far as how long we've audited, a long time, I don't honestly know. And that's true for virtually every client of ours. Most of our clients are 20, 30-year clients.
Okay.
Best practice statistically is you have the highest rate of audit failure that occurs in the first year or two of a new audit. I follow the stuff pretty closely. Back when Enron failed, they had studies on, do we need auditor rotation? And they found kind of the exact opposite of what people think. But with that said, we have five CPAs on your engagement, and we always ensure that at least one new CPA is new to your engagement, and at least one is consistent on the engagement. And I feel like that provides kind of the best of both worlds, where you're not running down stuff that someone maybe knows the answer to, but you also get a fresh perspective. So I think the answer is, if you feel like we're not providing you adequate service, then you should find other accountants. If you feel like we are, then you shouldn't.
Great.
The truth is, there's only about 3 firms in the state that do this type of work.
Yeah, that's not surprising. Okay, thanks. I just wanted to check on that. And then I guess my final comment is like, nice job, because it sounds like you put us in a really strong financial position, and to hear that we have an extra $1 million because of investments made is exciting. So thank you.
Thank you.
Director DeFreitas, did you want to add anything since we were extending time?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you all for your great work and
Sorry, can I say just one thing? Because this is a
Please.
public forum.
Yep.
That a lot of work by the finance team goes into this. And so I'd like to thank Catherine Proctor, Laura Quinlivan, Dave Plath, Cindy Fishman, Crystal Manabuson, and Mayor Ferrafino, as well as the finance specialists in all the schools. They put in a lot of hard work and they make sure that the work is done right. And really a special thanks to Catherine Proctor. She's our financial controller. It can be like herding cats, me included, or me especially. And she does a great job. And really it's a team effort. So all the good things you heard tonight is really a reflection of their hard work, which makes us all look good.
I'm an auditor. I don't say anything nice, but I agree.
great job. Thank you for,
Thank you.
Such
Don't
a great
forget to
report.
vote and pass that thing.
okay,
Oh.
so next, are there any,
We're talking about, don't forget.
before you leave, are there any intervening motions to amend? So please call to vote.
Director Titler,
Aye.
Director After,
Aye.
Director DeFreitas.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We will now have a follow-up presentation from Faride Rodriguez and Lori Brumbaugh regarding the approval of early childhood education tuition rates. Do I have a motion to approve the ECE tuition for 24-25?
I move that the board approve the ECE tuition rates for 24-25 as presented.
Do I have a second?
I second.
We will now have 2 minutes discussion for each board member and 5 minutes open discussion. And we will start with Director DeFreitas.
First of all, I just want to thank you both for returning, especially after a long night last time. Thank you for your time. Appreciate you being here. And appreciate you taking the suggestions and questions from the board with such good effort. I do not have a lot of concerns with the adjustments made. I think some of the question just again kind of comes down to the 5 full days question, but I heard the reasoning behind that. So I don't really have anything else to offer for tonight.
Director After.
I don't have any questions. Thanks for coming back and representing this.
I will echo my colleagues saying thank you for being back here, sitting through a long night already with this. So thank you for being here. I do have 2 quick questions. The first one being, will you come back to us or will you send us some kind of update when you come up with the amount of days that Basalt will be providing? Right now is at per diem, but you'll have like a number to give to us at some point.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. And then my second question, and maybe you know this and maybe you don't, is there any kind of like comparison? So for example, the extended day comes out as $81 per day for the extended day. Do we know how that compares to private preschools in our region or in the Basalt area or the Carbondale area? Is that similar, less, more? Do we know where that we stand as far as comparison?
Please speak directly.
Yeah, I think the difference between our program and other private programs are that we only offer the 5-day. And so when you attend a community center, maybe you have more flexibility in like the number of days you attend. So that changes your tuition. I think, I don't know, I think across the board, we're fairly similar.
I think if we err anyway, we're a little high in this valley. We banked our tuition rates. We checked them against the Rocky Mountain Early Childhood Coalition, which is our kind of region that includes a couple counties. And we were right in the middle of that collective group. And that was last year.
Yeah.
And we held all our tuition rates.
Yeah.
We didn't increase this year.
Great. And just one more follow-up question on that, being that there's so much in-kind support for our programs, being that we're not paying rent on our properties, for example, is there a reason why we're only average and we're not able to offer a better price?
That's a great question. You know, you'll see it in the budget that comes out, but our ECE programs still run at a deficit against the district, despite the in-kind support that you're spot on, like facilities, administration, HR, all those things that an independent program has to outsource or do internally, we do as a district to support, and our program still loses money. I think when we look at what's different about our program is offering full health benefits to employees. That's a big deal. That's a big cost. Para with that 23% on top that private company or private preschool programs doesn't have to pay. That's an increase, but it's also this incredible benefit for our staff in terms of having retirement. It's a great benefit. It's still hard when you're only making 21 an hour in this valley. So we're still trying to really leverage some different blended funding streams that we really haven't as a school district early childhood program. I would say the other piece where we see our expenses much higher is around our staffing of early childhood special educators. And although we do receive funding from the federal government for special education, it doesn't pay what the real cost of the staffing of our special education teams. And somewhere around, I think right now, 20 to 21% of our preschool students are students with disabilities receiving those services. So that's a big expense that's a little different than private programs.
And is there any expense towards running only like a 9-month program versus a 1-year program, do you feel?
We're about to find out. We're not,
With
you know,
extended-
we try to build, you know, where the Basalt expansion has this commitment to the community that we will run a 12-month program there. So it's really going to be our first try at this. And we've been looking at some models. And of course, we've been very cautious in building in our other centers, kind of like some trial, maybe 5-week summer programs that were maybe shorter in scope, but we've been really needing to rely upon, do we have the staff interest? Do we have then a budget that would float and still be affordable for families to make that sort of program work? So that's to be determined. But we're jumping in with Basalt and optimistic that we'll be able to pull it off.
Thank you. So we're now open for 5 minutes continued discussion. If there's any other comments or questions.
I actually did have just one. In the total gross household income, the different categories, is household number, like dependents or people, is that taken into account there at all? I just didn't see it noted anywhere.
On the sliding scale.
Mhm.
We do ask that question. We do take it into consideration. We do ask it on the form, on the application.
So does that affect the category? So for example, a 108 family with 4 or 5 versus just 1 or 3 people. I mean, is that?
No, we do ask that for that information, but it doesn't.
It doesn't. Yeah, we don't weigh in the household size.
Should we?
It's a good question. I mean, we
Question.
built this off of the housing sliding scale. So that was our model. And then what we were trying to do, and you've heard the housing team say they were trying to stay within that 30% of your income allocated towards housing. There's also kind of a national standard on childcare that's at about 10% of your income should be. You shouldn't be spending more than 10% of your income on childcare. That's astounding. Like that's still a really high number. And we tried to set up this sliding scale around that to target that not higher than 10%. Most of the time it works, but the minute you have 2 kids, it's like blown out. It doesn't work. So we could probably do more. I mean, I think when we tried to assess, I think the first year we ran this program, it cost the district about $80,000 in that benefit. And I don't know that we've pulled the full numbers for this year yet. I think it's going to be more of what we invest to make sure this program works. But I would say most of the time when we're using the staff sliding scale, we're stacking a lot of benefits programs for families. So we're loading the staff sliding scale with UPK, with CCAP if families are eligible, with early Head Start in Basalt if you've got toddlers. So there's a couple different ways we try to stack it. And to be honest, we have made the decision that no child will be turned away due to an inability to pay. And so at the end of the day, we're going to figure it out with people with what they can afford. And we have a bunch of families that we work with on plans, and we work, as long as folks are working with the Family Resource Center and leveraging all the other benefit programs that they could access, TANF, WIC, then we'll work with any family. We want kids in our program. So it's tricky, but we could look at it again.
Well, I think it makes sense when you talk about benefit stacking and leveraging other opportunities and working with not turning kids away. That clarifies that enough for me. Maybe it's something we revisit again in the future, but it doesn't feel like perhaps now.
Nothing for me.
Great. Thank you again for taking your time out of your day and coming back, and appreciate the information. And we have to first call vote. So are there any intervening motions to amend? So we'll have a call to vote, please.
Director After,
Aye.
Director DeFreitas,
Aye.
Director Titler.
Aye. Thank you. The next business in order is board reports and comments, and we will begin with Director After.
This week is only Wednesday, but I feel like it's been busy. I had the opportunity to come and participate in the Wellness Committee and the Family Advisory Council meetings yesterday, which were really well attended, both by staff and community partners, as well as different stakeholder groups and lots of parents who had never met before. So kudos to Kelly and the team for facilitating those. There were lots of kiddos taking advantage of childcare that was offered, and just overall a really, I thought, productive meeting. I also had a chance this week to go to CCS, Carbondale Community School, and do a site visit there, which was lovely. And Dr. Cole and I got a chance to spend some time with the leadership there and see all the really remarkable learning that's taking place at one of our 2 local charter schools. So thanks to that team for putting that together.
Great. Director DeFreitas.
I'm afraid I do not have a coherent report to offer this evening.
I would like to continue with what Dr. Cole was saying about the tremendous amount of work that the IBB team has been putting in. So we just did have the update for the work that the different groups have been doing, and came back as an IBB sort of as a midway point to check in, but it's really close to the end. And in March, there'll be the final, and early March is going to be the sort of the final IBB recommendations. But as part of that, there have been 4 or 5 subcommittees working together on pretty much a weekly basis. I've been working on the benefits one and the salary group, and it's just really a lot of work by a lot of people and a lot of hours. And it's what I appreciate is the teamwork and the back and forth and building off of each other's ideas. And I appreciate how everybody's in it for the best interest of everybody, and with the final being the interest of the students at the core of what we're doing. So just a lot of work there. And I also want to give a shout out to the Housing Committee, who's been doing a lot of meeting and who presented to us tonight about the work that they've done. Chief Baumfox put in a lot of work with that, and his committee also. And so thank you for all the work revising and updating the regulations and the different types of regulations that are being updated in that committee. And again, also a thank you to the great work being done over Meadowood. We got our move-in dates, and unfortunately, there's 2 of the buildings that won't be ready for the start of school. And so we're going to have to figure out how to work around that with the housing situation there, but they will be up by September, hopefully, and one of the buildings will be ready for the start of school. So a great job there. So lots of good things happening.
Sorry, I forgot something.
2 thumbs up. Okay.
Just on the future agenda topics, I mentioned this last time, but I'm hoping that once we get through the round of work we're in the midst of right now related to superintendent hiring and annual review, et cetera, that we can have a good conversation and update on special ed and the status of special ed at the district.
Great, thank you. Next up, and in our last point of business, is just some board appreciations. And so we'll start with Director DeFreitas, maybe. I'm not sure where we're at.
I just wanted to appreciate the folks who've signed up for and been participating in the Superintendent Hiring Advisory Committee. Their schedule is not an easy one, especially since many of them are teachers or staff in the district, and they're showing up in evening hours and finding subs for a few days and wholly engaging in this really important process. And I just wanted to appreciate the effort that they're putting in, as well as Jonathan and his efforts, Chief Landon, to coordinate with the scheduling. That is a huge lift right now. And I just wanted to say I appreciate those people for being involved.
I wanted to share our appreciation for our fellow board members who aren't here today. There's lots of sickness going around, and hope that they are able to rest and recover and come back strong later this week. And again, share my appreciation for the school visit at CCS this week, as well as the work that Crystal River Elementary is doing to keep those kids healthy and safe, and just lots of appreciation for that school right now, because that's where my kids go, and I see that hard work happening every day.
And I will just throw out an appreciation, which I think I did a few board meetings ago, but just want to reiterate, it's sort of a dog days of the year right now, with a long time in between really meaningful breaks, even though we're just coming off a 3-day weekend, which is, I'm sure, much appreciated. But this is a long stretch without much breaks for both staff and students. And so just appreciating the effort that is being given in that area, and will be continued until the end of March. And so thank you there. And then also piggybacking off of what Director After said, thank you to our missing board members for the work they do. And especially I want to say thank you to Director Kuhlenberg for running the meetings. And I find that I was a little frazzled today with trying to keep it on board. So I appreciate the work that she does every week, keeping us up with that. And again, just one more time to Chief Markham and his staff for putting us in what seems like such great position. And as Paul says, a gold standard is really awesome. So thank you.
You did a good job.
Thank you.
I appreciate you, Kenny.
So if there's no further
Piper.
business and there's no objection, this meeting is adjourned.